Dean and Andy, thank you both so much for being here. We've got a lot to talk about, but I want to jump straight into the Detroit Pistons taking on the New York Knicks in the NBA playoffs. They dropped Game 1, but were able to make a comeback and tie up the series in Game 2 earlier this week. Now the series heads to Detroit, kind of focusing on that second game more so. Dean, I want to start with you. What do you kind of see, or what did you take away from those first two games, that last game in particular, when Detroit was able to come out on top?
Yeah, Phil, what I really took away was, the Pistons played well once again. They played well in Game 1, except for the 21-0 run that the Knicks went on in the fourth quarter. And once again, Pistons built a lead. They were up 13 in the second half, or in the fourth quarter, and I was a little bit worried when Knicks came back, tied it. Dennis Schroeder hits a huge three. But what I liked was the Pistons able to kind of overcome the adversity, right? In Game 1, they weren't able to do that and get the win. Game 2, they kind of weathered the storm. Schroeder hit the big shot, and now we're tied 1-1 going back to Detroit on Thursday.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of knew that was maybe going to be the narrative going into the playoffs here for the Pistons, as they don't have that much experience. Obviously, Schroeder ended up being a huge piece they added at the deadline for some of that experience. But, yeah, I think the first game, it kind of just got away. I mean, it didn't just get away from a little bit. A 21-0 run is pretty impressive from the Knicks in the fourth quarter there in Game 1. I feel like that both teams probably felt like going into Game 2 they let one slip away. And when they got to Game 2, it was like, are the Pistons going to be able to – you knew they were going to be in the game again, I think. This team just isn't going to get blown out. It doesn't feel like at all, just because of the way that they play and their play style. But it was more, can they actually finish the deal this time? They were able to do that. I think this is what the Pistons want to do. They want to have a game where the race to 100 points is probably going to be the team that wins. They want to play with defense. And they do like to play fast, but it kind of works in, Cade's like methodical style. When he's playing well and they're doing what they need to do, they play well. So, and he played so much better than he did in Game 1. Obviously struggled a lot. Yeah, I think he finished 15 points, but I think he had, no points in the second half till a good amount through the fourth quarter. So, and he only had one field goal in the first half. So, yeah, it was definitely more of a struggle in Game 1 than it was in Game 2, but you can kind of expect that. I think J.B. Bickerstaff deserves a lot of credit for getting that team ready to go there in Game 2.
And, Dean, you touched on last week that Malik Beasley was going to be kind of the dark horse, and Andy, on the other side, you said it was all going to rely on Cade Cunningham. Well, now seeing what those two players have kind of done, are you guys still sticking with your guys going into Game 3 as sort of that X factor, or do you guys want to maybe make a change a little bit? I know Cade had that huge game in Game 2.
I think, obviously Beasley has struggled with his three-point shot. Pistons were not very good from outside the three-point line on Tuesday or in Game 2. However, I think a big factor has been Jalen Duren. He had another double-double, played like 40-some minutes, so he played more minutes than he had the entire playoffs, and they're going to need him to be on the floor and to be able to contribute in those ways.
Yeah, I think I did kind of think Jalen Duren was going to be a player that was maybe going to be an X factor if he could stay out of foul trouble. I think that did prove to be a thing. But I think the one thing you want to look at right now, if you're the Pistons going 1-1 back to Detroit, I think Tim Hardaway needs to score more than 0 points. I would change that to being my X factor, because if they got away with it in that game, I don't think they'll get away with it again. He doesn't score too much for them every game, but, I mean, he does average around 15 points a game. So I think the fact that they got away with getting a win without him scoring any points at all, going 0-8 from the field, was somewhat lucky in that way. I think that he needs to be his normal self in this next game. But I think all these starters need to do what they do for the Pistons, because they're not super deep besides Beasley. So obviously Paul Reed was a huge player too, with Isaiah Stewart in the bench. So he was able to get a couple key putbacks and get some big rebounds for them. So it's a collective effort, but I definitely think Tim Hardaway is the one that I'm looking at going forward here.
And, obviously the series is tied now heading to Detroit. Many people would probably assume that now that the series is tied 1-1 going with the Pistons back home, that they've got all the momentum. They were able to steal a game from the Knicks. Do you guys kind of see it that way? I mean, New York, with a team with playoff experience, and really only added it with Karl Anthony Towns and OG Anunoby coming to the team. Do you think that they maybe are looking to get that win back while they're in Detroit, and maybe are looking and maybe even have a little bit of momentum, knowing that they also kind of struggled a little bit in Game 2 and we're still kind of right there at the end?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they're going to complain more about fouls. I'm not sure. But if they don't do that, I would say they definitely, obviously, I mean, they want to win every game. Yeah. But when it comes down to it, I think, the momentum has definitely shifted in the Pistons' favor. But again, this is kind of what we talked about last week. I think the environment is going to be a lot. I think it helped the Knicks a lot there in Game 1 when they got rolling and got in that 21-0 run. What is Detroit going to do? Are they going to show up? Are they going to fill the arena like the Knicks did at Madison Square Garden? Obviously, that's a iconic venue, and Knicks basketball fans are crazy. Even if, they haven't won in forever, but they still show up. It'll be interesting with the Pistons getting their first playoff win in 17 years in this most recent one, and being 1-1 with a 3 seed coming back. Will the crowd show up and do? I think they will. I think it's going to be an impressive showing for the Detroit fans there in the stadium. It'll be interesting to see what the life is around outside of it. Obviously, the Tigers are unfortunately off on Thursday. Otherwise, it would have been like a doubleheader, and that way it will be on Sunday. There'll be both games going on. So I think it'll bring a lot of people into Detroit, and it should give them an advantage.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andy. I think, being back at home, the place is going to be electric. And I think the Pistons are going to build. First playoff win since 2008. That to me, that means something. These guys gained some confidence by getting that win. They kind of got over the hump. And now they can look forward to, hopefully taking 2 in Detroit and going back to New York with a chance to wrap up the series. The contributions, like you said, have to be throughout the lineup. Tim Hardaway Jr. cannot do what he did before, and I think Grant Hill said this in the broadcast the other night, that he thinks the Knicks are bothered by the Pistons' size. And I think their defense obviously has caused some problems for Jalen Brunson. And you're right, if he stops falling down and stops crying about fouls, it's different. When Cade goes to the basket, he's getting bumped, he's getting fouled. Brunson kind of flops and he kind of hooks and he does all these different things where, he's trying to draw the foul. And I think hopefully the refs are going to kind of see that and not let that go on throughout the rest of the series.
Well, I think that's a good question to ask both you guys. What do you guys think is going to happen with that? Because obviously their coach made a huge deal about it, and the NBA knows about it now. It's saying that they didn't get enough calls, even though they did. I mean, the fouls were almost even. Do you think that'll swing how the refs call these games?
I think I've watched enough NBA basketball to know that the stars are still going to get those calls, and whether you think it or not, Jalen Brunson is in fact a star. He's multiple time All-Star.
He's a great player.
Great player, and even those little things do kind of drive you a little crazy, especially as a Pistons fan. I think what will end up happening is he might get called for flopping 1 or 2 of those times, but that's really all I feel like will do it for the Pistons fan base. I think seeing that happen at least 1 or 2 times, even if it happens multiple times in a game, just having those 1 or 2 calls actually go in Detroit's favor, I think is what the NBA is probably going to end up doing as far as trying to corral it a little bit. They can't outright outlaw it this far into the season in a big-time playoff series, but kind of just, getting 1 or 2 calls in Detroit's favor, I think, is what they're going to try to do. Try to balance it out a little bit. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been nice to see Cade get some of the calls now. Regular season,
Right.
he didn't get a lot of those, all-star calls or calls that a lot of the top players in the league get, when they take the ball to the basket. So it's nice to see the first couple games, Cade's getting those whistles and he's able to take advantage from the free throw line.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit with it. I think that even though they were flops from Jalen Brunson, I think they were fouls. He did get them off their feet on those 2 3-point attempts. And if I'm the Pistons and I'm JB Bickerstaff, the first thing I'm saying at practice is no matter what he does, don't leave your feet.
Right.
Just stay on the ground.
It's the number one thing that you always say as a coach. Stay on your feet, get a hand up, contest the shot, and don't go for it, because that's what Jalen, like you said, that's what Brunson like. And I agree with you. Those were fouls on those couple plays. But yeah, stay grounded.
We listen to Coach Dean, so
Yeah.
yes, that's what we should do for sure.
Right, absolutely. Well, no matter what happens this weekend over these next 2 games, the series is going to eventually head back to New York for Game 5. Do you guys want to make a prediction as far as what you think the series is going to be leading into that 5th game in New York? Do you think Detroit's going to be back up 3-1, potentially trying to take the series at Madison Square Garden, or maybe we're looking at potential 2-2 split again going into Game 5?
I will change from how many games I think it will go. I think it'll go to 7 now, but I'm still going to take the Knicks. I'm still going to be that guy. So
Wow.
I think the experience is eventually going to outweigh it, and they're going to be able to find a way to get it done. No matter what you think of Jalen Brunson, what I've seen from that guy in the first 2 games scares me if I'm a Pistons fan. I think if they can get some of their other pieces to play better, it's going to be really, really tough to stop them, because the foul trouble is something that still scares me with Duran down the line, and some of these younger guys like Sar Thompson obviously fouling out of this game. He's going to play as hard as defense, but sometimes you can play a little too hard when you're young and make those kind of mistakes. I think that will maybe keep bugging him down the line. They'll lose some of their key defenders. I think the Pistons will win a couple more games in this series, but I'm still going to take the Knicks in 7.
All right. Well, Shaq said the Pistons were going to beat the Knicks, and I told you last week, Pistons in 6, and I'm sticking with it.
Sure.
The Pistons have not played a complete game yet. We look at it. It's foul trouble. Some guys have been off. So, I still don't think they played their best game. And, you take away even half of that run in the fourth quarter, and they probably come away with game 1. So, to me, the playoff jitters are over. They're confident. They're comfortable. They're going back home for a couple. And it won't surprise me if Detroit wins the next 2 games at home, loses in New York, Game 5, and wins it in Game 6.
I'll definitely stick with that. I don't think it will surprise me either if that does happen because, the Pistons are good. Like I said, they're going to compete in every game. I don't think they're going to get blown out, and I could see a lot of these games coming down to, the final few plays, but I just like more of the Knicks playmakers in those situations at the end of the game. That's the reason I'm taking them.
Yeah, no, it just goes to show how difficult it can be to kind of predict these NBA playoffs. It's really all about matchups. You see New York is a 3 seed, Detroit is the 6 seed, and you think, all right, well, 3 seed should be able to kind of handily put them away, but Detroit matches up so well against New York that, again, I would not be surprised at all if this thing went 7 games. But that's what we're going to be kind of keeping an eye out for, especially when they play the next couple of games in Detroit. Hopefully we'll be talking about Detroit going on to the conference semifinals next time around. But now let's switch over to baseball a little bit, and specifically the Whitecaps. They're coming off a 6-game winning streak. They're kind of still in the middle of it. They blew out the South Bend Cubs really during that 6-game stretch, 42-21 runs. Really impressive. This is kind of the team that we thought that they would be.
Yeah, the Whitecaps are playing really, really well right now. I was out there on Sunday, and an interesting note from that game was before the game, Max Clark turned to Seth Stevenson, who hasn't hit a home run all year, kind of a light-hitting guy, doesn't hit a lot of home runs out. He told him, hey, you're going to hit a home run today. And what did Seth do? First inning, first at-bat, went out and hit a home run. So that was kind of cool from his part. And in talking to him, he said the wind kind of was his best friend because he kind of needs the wind to help him when it was blown out a little bit. So, that was kind of cool to see. But, no, this team is getting contributions throughout the lineup. Brett Callahan, Jose Briseño. They have a lot of guys who are hitting right now, and their pitching has been solid. The Whitecaps pitchers don't go a lot of innings. I think the other night they had their first starting pitcher got the first win of the season, but their bullpen's been really good. And, yeah, it's a team that's starting to kind of find its groove, and, they're a fun team to watch. And the biggest thing to me is at home. That they 9-0 to start the season at home, first time in franchise history. So they're doing a lot of good things right now.
Yeah, for sure. They've been a lot of fun to watch. I was at a couple of the games last week, both the 2-1 finals I was at, so I didn't get all the run action. But they've been a lot of fun to watch. Obviously their lineup is full of hitters, but I think the one really fun story so far is the knuckleballer Kenny Serwa. He pitched the game when I was there and earned his first win. He's went 11 innings so far and hasn't allowed a run. And this guy was somebody who literally was just putting up his pitching videos on YouTube, and the Tigers were able to find him and sign him. And it's pretty insane that he's been able to do what he's done so far. Went 5 innings in that game, struck out 6 that I was at on Thursday, I believe, of last week, and they won 2-1. So I think I kind of said the last time we talked about the Whitecaps that when they were on there a little bit of a losing skid there on the road, it was kind of coming down to pitching because they were allowing more than 5 runs in all those losses on the road, and they were able to kind of eliminate that in the series against the Cubs, and they were able to take care of business and hold them to under 3 runs quite a bit. So, yeah, they definitely are on the better side of pitching right now. I think their offense is going to take care of itself for most of the year, and everybody knows that baseball in Michigan, when it gets a little warmer, the bats usually warm up too. So, with this lineup, it's not going to surprise me if they keep doing this all year on offense. But pitching is definitely something to pay attention to, and right now it's doing its job.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you haven't been out to see a Whitecaps game at LMCU Ballpark already, might want to head out and go do so. They seem to be playing pretty well at home. But if you go and they end up losing their first game of the season, maybe you won't be allowed back in there. All right, kind of shifting back now to hockey. The Griffins, we've got a lot to talk about hockey, but I want to start off with the Griffins. They officially got that first round bye. They're going to be taking on the Texas Stars in the Calder Cup Playoffs. That first game is set for next Tuesday. How do you guys like that matchup against the Stars, Andy?
It's definitely an interesting one for the Griffins. I'm not super confident in it. The Stars are 5-3 against them this year, and they're 3-1 at the Van Andel Arena. Obviously, the Griffins get the first 2 games at home. The first one will be Tuesday of this upcoming week, and then the following Monday. Again, kind of going back to a little bit of what I talked about last week with so crazy at the scheduling in April at these bigger arenas because it just brings all the separation. If you tell somebody in the street, oh, the next game must be Thursday or something like that. No, it's almost a whole week later for just game 2. So there's a lot of separation and a lot of time to correct mistakes if they do have some in game 1. But the Griffins have definitely been playing better down the stretch. One player that I was definitely questioning a little bit if they would get back was Elmer Soderblom. He is fighting a little bit of injuries, so I'm not sure if he's going to be out there on the ice. I'm sure he's working to get back on the ice. For the Red Wings to even send him back to Grand Rapids, he must at least have a chance to practice and if not play. So that'd be huge if they got him back, because he moves the puck super well for them in the power play and on offense in general. But yeah, no, I like what I'm seeing a lot of them right now. Getting Dominic Shine and Austin Watson back has been huge for them on offense. Amadeus Lombardi has had a great season since he's returned from the injury. So if you get the chance to go out and watch them, they have a lot of players that are fun to watch. But yeah, Texas is definitely one of the tougher teams in their division, and it's been that way for a while now for them. The Griffins have struggled against them, so we'll see if they're able to find a way to, they don't have home ice advantage, but in a way it feels like when you get the first 2 games at home, if you can win both those, you set yourself up for a pretty good chance to win 1 of 3 when they have to go on the road to Texas. So I like how they at least get to start the series at home, and I think that could bode well for them.
Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the bracket a little bit earlier today, and if the Griffins were able to beat the Stars, they would potentially set up a rematch from last year's Calder Cup Playoffs against the Milwaukee Admirals. They're waiting to see who they're going to be playing in their next round matchup. But do you think the Griffins are maybe kind of looking forward to that potential scenario a little bit, maybe more so, and kind of maybe even overlooking the Stars a little bit?
That's why I think it's key to have guys like Dominic Shine back and Austin Watson, because they're players that have been there before and they might be able to keep them in check. And I also like Coach Dan Watson. He does a great job with these guys, and he took a little bit of heat after the All-Star break with them not doing as well and losing a lot of games. I was surprised some of the stuff I saw on social. I guess I would never be surprised about what I see on social media, but he's been phenomenal with these players so far, and I really think he'll do a good job of keeping them locked in.
All right, well, from one hockey team to the next, we're going to shift over as the Griffins are getting ready for the postseason play. The Red Wings, their NHL affiliate, are looking to probably spend the next spring and summer from the couch, or this spring and summer from the couch, not unfortunately missing the playoffs for the 9th straight season. And really the story of the postseason, I guess, for the Red Wings came from closing interviews with Dylan Larkin. He actually expressed his displeasure a bit with the team, how they handled really around the trading deadline and around that March sort of part of the season when they were maybe starting to build a little bit of momentum. He said that they felt a little deflated after not making any moves, and kind of threw some shots at the front office. I mean, what did you kind of make of those remarks from Dylan Larkin?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a tough spot for him to be in. You can kind of tell if you go back and watch the clip at all. He kind of struggles a little bit to know what to say, because he wants to say something, but obviously Dylan is the captain of this organization. It's been that way now for 9 years. He only made the playoffs his first year, which is that 10th year. So obviously for the last 9 years, he's been a part of the team, and they haven't made the playoffs. So they obviously got a little bit more talent around him now than they had before with Alex DeBrincat. Lucas Raymond has turned out to be a great draft pick, and they have Patrick Kane, who can obviously provide some offense. And they believe that I think they can win with those top 6 guys. But if you read between the lines of what he said, he basically kind of called out Steve Yzerman a little bit for not adding at the deadline and bringing a player. And obviously the Red Wings have struggled at center. Their defense has been a little sketchy the past few years, and has been a big problem for them. And they've had these marches where they struggle. They went 4-10 in March this past year. And I think they were looking for, at that point, after having a couple 7-game winning streaks before that, it proved they could win. They just maybe need a little bit more to get over the hump when the season gets a little later and you get more tired. And they didn't really add anything to help them. And I think, Patrick Kane got asked the same question, and he was a little nicer about it and said it didn't deflate him. Dylan was the person that took it on his shoulders to say it was stressing them out. And obviously, Dean, you're somebody who watched Steve Yzerman more than I did back then, and people love him as a player around here. But when you got the captain saying stuff like this, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily asking for a trade or anything like that. But I think he's definitely expressing the fact that he needs to see something change, like a lot of the fan base is starting to say. Otherwise, this isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I just think there's some frustration there, right? Like the season didn't go the way they had planned. They're hoping to make the playoffs this year. They get rid of their coach, get a new coach, and they go on that long winning streak. And I kind of agree. You didn't do anything at the trade deadline. You didn't provide a spark. There was no momentum that you could kind of build off of, like, hey, we picked up so-and-so, and now we're going to, continue winning and make the playoffs, And if you, obviously, Andy, you watched them, the Red Wings played like that, right? They had really, really bad stretches where they just didn't play well. And you know, and you could see that, you know, the guys weren't playing with as much confidence as they were, and you know, obviously it led to them missing the playoffs again. So I think it's for Larkin, it's frustration. You know, obviously Steve Yzerman's going to see that a little bit, and maybe he'll make some moves in the offseason because something kind of has to change. We have 3 successful sports teams right now in Detroit, and the Red Wings are the one kind of falling short.
Yeah, I think if he doesn't make moves in the offseason, he's not going to hear the end of it. Because I don't understand how you can at this point. When it gets to that point in the season, you need to win. When you get these losing streaks where you lose 3 to 4 games in the NHL, it's going to happen. I mean, it's a long season in hockey, it goes for a long time, but when you can't stop the skid at that and you fall for 7 straight, 8 straight, 9 straight games again, like that's kind of the proof in the pudding that yes, you can draft these players that are been developed in Grand Rapids very well, and he's done a good job with it. But if you don't add real adults in the room that have been playing the NHL for a while, it's kind of tough to win at that level. And I think that's kind of what Dylan's not saying that way. I think he believes in a lot of the players that are on his team, but it just comes down to the fact that sometimes you need a name. And right now, I don't think they have enough of those in their lineup, players that are known around the NHL, that it's too hard to win without it.
And what do you think about the remarks themselves? Because obviously, as the captain, everybody's going to be paying attention to them, and like Dean was saying, that it might get the ball rolling a little bit for the front office to make those moves. But at the same time, I saw people specifically on social media talking about how this doesn't really look good for the team captain, or doesn't look good for the Red Wings as an organization. I mean, what do you really make of Dylan Larkin kind of just putting it all out there in the open?
Yeah, it's honestly crazy to me that that's like the reaction that people are giving to it. I don't see it that way. For me, it's a guy that he's been here for this long, and I think maybe fans forget to realize how long he actually has played here now. This has gone on for years. He's been through the rebuild. He's been there the whole time when they won the least amount of games in NHL history. I forget what season it was. I think it was 2018 or 19, whatever season that was. He's been through all that, and he's played with a lot of players that aren't good enough to win. And I think at this point in his life, he's realizing he's getting up there in age when it comes to hockey years. And if they don't get the talent around him now to win, then I don't see how it's going to happen when he's able to play the way that he plays right now, which is still fast. He's still a key contributor. He can be that way. I mean, it's hard for me to judge it, but because I never played hockey and I understand the game's hard. But for me, it's like I don't know if Dylan Larkin is a one center. I don't know if he's a player that can play with some of the Rantanens of the world, or Sidney Crosby in his prime. Like those players that just like took over games and won it. Larkin's getting to the point in his career, maybe he can't be that guy, and I think they need that guy at center. So I understand asking for help, and I think that if Steve is your GM and the guy who cares about the city as much as he has to sign and stay here through all that I feel like people should be defending Dylan Larkin over not. But
Dean kind of saying
I agree, right? As a captain, you have to step up and you have to express your feelings. You have to express, like I said earlier, the frustration of not being able to get top-notch players in here to help this organization win. And so, I have no problem with that. He stepped up, he said what he said, and like I said, hopefully the Red Wings, front office hears that and can do some things in the offseason here to get them back on track.
I mean, yeah, draft and develop, that's fine. I understand that, like that mantra, and I like how they want to win that way. They want to win with their own guys, but you're not getting it done now, and it's like, what are we holding the draft picks for? What are we holding there's so many young players they brought up this year who can play at the NHL level. I don't want them to get rid of all of them necessarily, and I'm not saying that by any means, but if you can't buy somebody, maybe work out a trade, because they drafted so well, they have so much talent down at the AHL level, guys that probably should have still been in the AHL this year that got moved up because of injuries and such. It's at the point where I think a little bit more heat needs to be put on the GM than Dylan Larkin making the comments. I feel like he's just saying, if we got a little bit of help, maybe we would have done better.
Right now, and I think it really is seen tenfold given the fact that the Pistons are in the playoffs. The Lions have had back-to-back really, really strong
Nobody would have
seasons.
guessed this.
The Tigers are coming off a postseason berth. I mean, the Red Wings, you asked maybe 10, 15 years ago that the Red Wings would be the one team in Detroit that wasn't sort of up to par. I mean, nobody would probably believe that.
Steve has preached what he's preached since he's been there, that he's going to do it from within. It's going to take time. I don't know how much more time you could possibly need. I mean, if it's just not...
He's running out of time.
Yeah, we're talking year 8 of his plan, the Yzer plan, as it's famously called. Right now, I just don't see where it's going unless they add pieces from the outside. And they have tried to do that with other people, but they just haven't worked out. I mean, Tarasenko was a complete flop this year. You got rid of Gostisbehere and you brought in Gustafsson. Gustafsson ended the season hurt, but he never really excelled like Gostisbehere did last year. David Perron was a key player when it came to like being a captain on that offense and scoring some key goals to them late on the stretch 2 years ago now when they almost made the playoffs and lost in the tiebreaker. Didn't bring him back, and I would have definitely taken him over adding Tarasenko. Like, it just felt like they did the wrong things culturally at the pro level, even if they weren't the biggest pieces. And I just feel like you got to do something with that pro scouting department right now. That's probably his one out, is to hire new people in that department and see where it goes this offseason.
Well, time will tell what the Red Wings decide to do there. And as I mentioned, we are going to be focusing more on the NFL draft next time. Next week, Dean and Andy will be joining me, and we'll kind of break down a little bit about what the Lions did, also some of the Michigan names that got called. But we did want to spend a little bit of time talking about one Michigan native who has been skyrocketing up draft boards really ever since their incredible combine performance, and that is Isaac Teslaw of Hudsonville. He played with the Arkansas Razorbacks, and Dean, you actually got the chance to talk to him this week a little bit. I mean, what's sort of where's his mind sort of at kind of going into draft night?
I did. It was really good to talk to Isaac and see him, and he did kind of a meet and greet at Union Christian on Monday night. Long line of kids and adults wanting his autograph, getting his picture taken. Then him and his dad kind of did a Q&A. But just talking to him, like, very interesting. He's the draft sleeper. I've kind of read what some other draft experts think about Isaac, and he's going to get drafted. He's having a draft day party on Saturday at his house, and that's probably going to be the day that he does get drafted by somebody. And talking to him, he did make visits with the Detroit Lions and Buffalo. Sent him out there, and he met with Buffalo as well, but he did Zoom calls with all 32 NFL teams, and so there's a lot of interest in Isaac right now. And one of the most interesting things was when he went for his visit with the Lions, he wore a Lions jersey, and lifelong Lions fan. So he says he walks past Dan Campbell's office, he sees him in there, and he's just kind of starstruck a little bit. So he said he spent 35 to 40 minutes talking with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and obviously all teams are going to, tell you what they like about, a certain player. And, they liked a lot about Isaac and said, they thought that he'd be a great fit for the team, and that's what they told him. So we'll see. To me, it'd be a dream come true for Isaac to get drafted by the Lions in the late rounds.
I think that's something that we kind of forget about during the whole draft process. Obviously, we know everybody's going to be emotional whenever they do hear their name and they get to walk across the stage, but getting to interview with all these coaches and GMs, even if you're a Lions fan like Isaac is, getting to talk to Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, the guys that have turned your childhood team into playoff contenders. I mean, that's got to feel really cool, right?
Probably hasn't stopped being a fan yet, I imagine. He's still lived here, so.
Yeah. And even the possibility of even getting drafted to the Lions. I know when Aiden Hutchinson got drafted, the talk was, Michigan graduate, from Michigan, getting to play for the hometown team. I mean, it's got to be surreal for them for sure.
Yeah, and what's funny, Phil, is he only had 24 catches last year at Arkansas, right? So he didn't have eye-popping numbers. But the biggest thing that kind of put him on the map was the combine. He did great in every aspect of the combine, and that kind of helped him get interest in himself and created a buzz amongst teams in the NFL. So I'm pulling for Isaac. He has really developed into a really, really good wide receiver, and I'm sure that some team's going to grab him, and I know he told me doesn't matter where he gets drafted, right? He's going to work as hard as he can to try to land a spot somewhere, somehow. And watching Isaac play in high school at Unity Christian, and then a couple of years at Hillsdale, and then obviously Arkansas, it's for a hometown kid to be able to, there's only been two Hudsonville guys from Hudsonville to play in the NFL through the years, so he would be the third one to get that chance, and I think he's got the attitude to do it.
For sure. I know we talked about his combine performance and just how much it really helped him. I do have some of the numbers right here. His 40 time was a 4.43, and he had a 39.5-inch vertical that they measured there in Indianapolis. And turns out that was actually the 16th. His total performance was the 16th most athletic by a wide receiver in NFL history. So just goes to show what this kid is capable of and why teams are now starting to pay a little bit more attention and are probably going to select him for during the NFL draft. Dean, Andy, great seeing you guys again. Thanks for stopping by. We're going to have tons more to talk about the NFL draft next week and probably throw in some Pistons news as well. So until next time, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bill.